At Dogfish Head, we rely on the goodness of Mother Nature to provide us with the beautiful and bountiful culinary ingredients used in both our off-center beverages and dishes at our restaurants. Mariah and I wanted to learn more in real time with the real people on the ground doing the work, addressing the environmental issues facing us globally, and on a localized level along Dogfish's backyard, the eastern seaboard. We reached out to our longtime partners at the Nature Conservancy for help, knowing their mission is centered around conserving the lands and waters on which all life depends. The very same lands and waters on which all the natural ingredients in the stuff we make comes from. So we decided to take a road trip from Miami to Maine to learn about the diverse and critical conservation efforts happening every day. We spoke to local environmental experts and explored Mother Nature's splendors. So buckle up and ride along on our Mother Nature Let's Do This road trip. All right, Mariah, you ready?
Let's do this.
Yeah.
We are at the Mananas River Gorge, which is the first piece of property that the Nature Conservancy protected.
Concerned citizens that decided to meld their unique superpowers and come together and say, let's start this mission.
That is essentially the story of this place. It was threatened by some kind of development, and the community came around and was trying to protect it. The Nature Conservancy was formed to facilitate the protection, because I think the energy was already there. There was a lot of the pieces were already set to go, and the Nature Conservancy helped to facilitate the process, which can be very complicated. Like land protection can be very complex, and so like sometimes an organization like the Nature Conservancy can come in and really like help guide the process or make it happen. Yeah. Prior to the pandemic, we were looking at 7,000 visitors a year, which is still pretty good for this part of the world. And then in 2020, we saw 25,000 visitors go through the preserve. Yeah. So it just really highlighted how important nature was to people during this like extremely challenging times, how important it was to have a place where you can be safe and be outside and see others, because that was one of the things that you could do still, like go outside and see people outdoors. And
it's going to be interesting to see as we come out of this, because like you said, in moments of crisis, you can see how important nature is to human beings. And hopefully as we come out of this, human beings will recognize how important nature is to us, right? So it's like critical moments.
Yes, and we're hopeful. We're very hopeful that that is the case. I know that the Nature Conservancy is for sure in New York acknowledging just how important these places are for people, and to make sure that we are providing access to as many types of people as possible, that our usership reflects the diversity of the communities around New York.
So what would be examples of the way the Nature Conservancy is proactively vetting that to understand it, and could potentially address evolving the spaces to make them more inclusive and accommodating?
So one of the things that we are doing is figuring out what the communities around our preserves look like. What is the demographics? Who are we serving, basically? Because we don't know right now. We have assumptions, but we want to make sure that the assumptions that we're making are truthful to on the ground. And so we are doing some demographic studies of the communities around our preserves. We are doing some deep listening of communities through interviews in which we are asking for stories. Our goal is to gather as many stories that we can, so we can see patterns in those stories to actually address the lived experiences of the many different people that are trying to access our preserves. Yeah. So we're right now primarily focusing on Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and we're asking them for their stories. We're saying, hey, we're trying to not ask pointed questions, because we don't want to bias one way or another. We want to actually know, how are you getting to our preserves? What is hard about getting to our preserves? What is getting in the way? Or if you don't have any challenges, great, tell us about that too.
Because learn from them.
Or maybe that's the solution. Maybe you have encountered a way to make nature more accessible. And the Nature Conservancy is doing it in a way that is evidence-based. Like I said, we're trying to not make assumptions. We're trying to not just say, this is what we're going to do. We're trying to, on the run, as we go, gather evidence and learn the best way forward.
Yep. So that each preserve stays as healthy and natural as possible, but that the community around it gets to engage with it, so that community stays healthy physically and mentally as well.
That is the goal.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
So we had a great day at the Mananas River Gorge in New York. It was the first ever TNC preserve, so it is what brought people together to create a conservation effort that's now global.
So cool. Oh my goodness. And that's why we're pairing it with Hazy O.
And while we were hiking, we saw this awesome spider web glistening with light, and it had a perfect O in the middle of it. The spiders know things.
Yeah, they know the holistic approach to keeping the world vibrant and sustainable. Also the O, talking about holistic, Marcella, who's an amazing guide to us today, not only is she a preserve steward, but she's doing really cool work with other leaders at the TNC organization, reaching out to community members near a lot of different preserves to better understand how they're using or maybe not using and engaging with nature and the preserves in their area, with the goal of getting more people comfortable and to go out and be part of Mother Nature and embrace the opportunities that TNC provides to welcome people out into nature. So I thought that part of her work was really cool and inspiring as well.
It was awesome. It was a great hike, great learnings.
Yeah, the power walk the way home. I felt it in my quads.
It was hard.
It was hard, but it was worth it. And now we get to burn it off.
Cheers.
With Hazy O.
Hazy O. Cheers.
So the island's only 6,000 acres, or about 9.5 square miles. About 47% of it, just over 47% of it's conserved in some way, shape, or form. It's all about location, right? It's always about location. We're in the right spot, migratory flyway, just offshore. Get a lot of birds, both raptors and songbirds, that migrate through, use this place. Really important stopover site where they hang out, sort of like a rest stop on I-95. Refuel, rehydrate, hang out, and then as soon as the winds are good, they're off and running. It's also important for a whole suite of insects. On the island total, there's about 40 threatened or endangered species. There's one federally threatened species. It's called the American burying beetle. This is the most viable population in the world, and it's actually being used as a source population for reintroduction efforts on both Nantucket and also in upstate New York currently. We think it's really important for school kids to understand what we're doing, and so we work very closely with the Block Island School to bring kids out to the various preserves, running a K through 12 program. So this is one of the nature's classrooms that we bring kids out to show them what we're doing, why we do it, and about appropriate stewardship. And it's really important to give the next generations that are coming the playbook of why we've done what we've done, and because they're going to be faced with really hard decisions. I mean, ultimately we only conserve the things we know and understand and love, and early on this place spoke to me, made my soul right, and ultimately you want to save that, right? You want to make sure that continues, and you want to make sure other people have the opportunity to experience that into the future. And so being in the outdoors, I got into wildlife and into birds, and that quickly leads you to, between love of place and love of a type of animal that's threatened in a lot of areas, leads you to conservation, and just the rest is history. All of a sudden you're on this ride that you kind of planned, but you didn't really, and it's a pretty amazing experience.
You said, years ago, before those were up, the island consumed 1 million gallons in diesel fuel a year, and now that's all generated by wind, right?
That's right. Air quality wise, it's huge. Diesel fuel not being used, it's huge. It's the first offshore wind project in the United States. Yeah. And now there are many more that are coming down the pike, but this was the first one, and it's really changed the island. You don't hear diesel generators running when you're in town. There's a lot of things a lot of positives from it, and I think we have to continue. I think Block Island's always led the way with kind of figuring out how to do it better and do it more ecologically sound, and we gotta just keep doing that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the inspiration. What you're doing really impresses everyone that gets to visit this island. Come visit Block Island. It's amazing here. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great Salt Pond, it's naturally a unique system. It's an estuary. It's comprised of different systems that make it into its own. With that being said, being on Block Island, an offshore refuge, attraction of life from all walks of life, even us. But the system itself, it's deeper, it's a bit saltier. It gets to 60 feet in the heart of the pond. We're looking across now, and you can see across the other side. But to think about it being that deep, that in itself, it creates slope, structure. Again, it attracts fish at different stages of life on a seasonal basis. So it's really the natural resources and just the physical characteristics lends itself to being that much more unique. And we've got a blend of different monitoring projects that characterize the system over time. Mostly fisheries assessments, but we also are in the marsh back here looking at necktie, which are free-floating larval stage of invertebrate species, crabs, crustaceans, shrimp, fish. But we also, we do a bird survey with one of my colleagues who is an ornithologist, and yeah, we just we're cataloging this information over time, and in hopes that while we have this information, that we can share with our partners and others that are interested in helping keep this place protected and pristine, and yeah.
So I got to sort of help while you did the heavy lifting, literally, while we played around with a massive seine net. And tell us about that, how you incorporate that into your work. And I think we saw about 6 different things that you guys recorded that we brought up from them. So.
Great, so the seine survey is part of a cooperative agreement we have with our partner, Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management. And so my colleagues on the other side, both the Nature Conservancy and DEM, we use this 130-foot net, and we go to fixed stations in our study areas, and we collect all finfish. We name the presence and absence of crustaceans, and the idea is that while we're, for quantifying purposes, looking at species of commercial and recreational importance to Rhode Island, we're also learning about other migratory and transient species that occupy the system from May through October, to have this comprehensive data set looking at what's occupying our system.
Massachusetts. So Massachusetts, we were chatting as we walked through this beautiful park about all the myriad ways that Massachusetts is really a prototype for many things in this fine country. Can you give some examples?
We are often the first.
Yes.
So the land we're on right now is the first conserved land in Massachusetts, Boston Common.
And in all of America?
Yes.
Wow.
People got together and said, we need a place for our cows to graze. Yeah. We need a place to go and have some green space. So this is it, right where we're standing, right here. In the 1600s, this land was set aside for conservation.
Wow. And what are other examples that Massachusetts has been a prototype in other ways?
On climate change. So we're one of the first states to have a Global Warming Solutions Act that sets statutory limits that require emissions reductions. And we were a leader on that. And that's one of the beauties of the Nature Conservancy. We have a regional and national network through which we have a cascading effect.
Wow.
We see things grow to scale through the state policy we do that has effects on regional policy and national policy. So, for example, we have in this region a program that's reducing emissions from electricity generation. And it's been so successful that we've reduced emissions from electricity by about 40 or 50%.
In Massachusetts? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you talk about these big moments of change, can you talk a little bit about the recent victory here in March with policy?
Absolutely. So the bill has a really long name, the Next Generation Roadmap Climate Policy for Massachusetts.
Wow.
But basically, it's about turbocharging our goals.
Yeah.
So now, up to 2050, we have to reach what's called net zero emissions.
Yeah.
That means reducing as much as possible from the big sectors, transportation, buildings, and electricity.
Yep.
But what's unique about this net zero goal is nature is going to play a role. So nature is going to draw down the remaining emissions.
Through carbon sequestration.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is a really monumental victory. And can you talk about how you and Emily and the federal and state teams work together on this kind of change?
Absolutely. So there's always this great cascading effect. So because there's been this huge pendulum swing back and forth in our federal government, because changes in leadership, we need states to lead and make the progress and be the icebreakers.
Yeah.
So Massachusetts is one of those icebreakers. We work on an icebreaker on a state scale and a regional scale. And we sort of get people acclimated to these changes. Yeah. And we provide the knowledge and science to show how these changes can be meaningful. Yeah. We provide the demonstration projects in communities, whether they're urban or rural or suburban. There's really a role for every acre when we're talking about natural climate solutions and carbon sequestration. And then we have the policy to help take things to scale.
So behind us we got the State House, and it's pretty cool. Like when Maine and Massachusetts were kind of one state along 1800s, I think. That actually the pine cone at the top, Steve told me, is an homage to Maine because so much of the lumber that went to building Boston came from Maine. And that sort of collaboration is a great example of how current that is between states. You gave me an example of work that you guys recently did in Massachusetts that impacted Maine. So climate control knows no borders, environmental policy knows no borders. What was that example?
So, when we're thinking regionally, we're thinking globally, we're thinking, we engage with donors in Massachusetts who, care about Massachusetts, but also really care about making a significant difference. And we had the good fortune of being able to connect a donor with a project in Maine preserving, over 10,000 acres, like a huge parcel of land.
So the money comes from Massachusetts donors, but it's used regionally outside the state.
We brought in $1 million
That's
this year
awesome.
for land conservation in Maine. And because we're all part of one conservancy, right? Their success, this success is all of our success because our goal is a big goal, right? How do we think about saving the planet by engaging the power of nature, right? How do we save species by, engaging the power of nature, right?
Couldn't be a bigger goal than that.
Nothing bigger than that.
So we're at the Damariscotta Mills fish ladder, which is right on the coast of Maine, where the Damariscotta Lake turns into a river and then dumps right into the ocean. And this is an example of one of the most innovative fish ladders that we have in the state, where I think that they said there was 1 million fish that came up through this last year, and probably going to get another 1 million fish going up this ladder this year.
Yeah, and I think for context, in 2007 there was less than 100,000 that made that same trip, and today it's 1 million. What components of the work TNC and obviously many partners are doing are helping to make those numbers so healthy?
Well, by making these fish ladders and designing them so that they can accommodate the sizes of runs of fish that are coming through is something that we're getting a lot better at. And then just more of these. So this is one example in one pond, but there's many of these streams and many of these ponds up and down the coastline that we can open up for alewife passage, either by putting fish ladders in or removing dams to get the fish to the places where they need to spawn. So as that ramps up and as people learn that this is something that used to be here, this is not unique to these streams. This was something 100 years ago. Every stream up and down the coast from North Carolina all the way up to Canada had these fish running up in them. So there's some situations where you can have hydropower and fish passage and get your environmental concerns and meet the need for power for people at the same time. But there's also a lot of situations out there where you have dams that actually don't create any power or would cost an exorbitant amount of money to repower. And in those cases, a lot of times we want to remove those completely and restore the river to a natural free-flowing condition. And that will allow not just for the fish like the alewives and salmon and eels that need to get upstream to spawn, but also allow for the river to just act naturally. They'll allow sediment transport, the water quality will increase. So there's tons of benefits for that when you remove those dams. I love doing this work because it is the ultimate intersection of people and nature. So we have a hydrologic condition right now that doesn't allow fish to get where they need to go. Basically, when you put a dam in, or even if you have a road crossing over a stream that's too small, you get water velocities that the fish can't handle. And when you have that situation, often that also results in a situation where you have a flood problem, because if the water can't get from one side of the road to the other, then it goes over the road and then you lose your crossing.
Yeah.
So we can address a lot of those things both at those road stream crossings and at dams in a way that will allow fish to get back up and have all of those benefits ecologically, as well as reduce the potential for flooding at those sites and make sure that people are spending less money on their infrastructure.
Right.
So there's a natural climate solution here that will work for climate adaptation for people at the same time as having benefits for fish getting to their native spawning habitats and increasing biomass in the ocean, and all of those cascading impacts that you get when you restore fish to where they need to go.
We're at Nequasit Dam in Woolwich, Maine, and behind us we're looking at an example of engineered fish passage. So we have a what's called a Daniil fishway that allows our mass migrations of river herring to move past the dam up into where they need to spawn and reproduce.
Yep, and we've talked about alewives and river herring. There's two types, right?
Yeah, so blueback herring and alewives are known collectively as river herring.
Yep.
So most of what we see here is probably alewife. The difference is that blueback herring spawn in rivers,
yep,
and alewives need pond or lake habitat to reproduce.
And there's a term for those kinds of fish that go between. What's that called?
Yeah, anadromous or diadromous species, and we just say sea run or migratory fish.
Sea run's the term I'm talking about, which is they spend some time in open, massive bodies of water, and sometimes in other smaller bodies.
Yeah, so they move from the ocean habitat up through estuaries and into freshwater. And they require both of those ecosystem types to survive. We, as TNC in Maine, we've set really big goals for ourselves to really push the envelope on what it means to restore rivers and streams in Maine. Over the next 5 years, we're aiming to have 2,000 miles of river and stream habitat reconnected. So ambitious goals, and frankly, we can't do it by ourselves. Like, we have really built over the years incredible partnerships with a number of state and federal agencies, communities, municipalities, other conservation organizations. And that's really what lets us work at a scale that makes sense in Maine, which is big.
Every project also takes into consideration the balance of all of these related factors, whether it's the fish, the environment, the community. Can you talk about that through your work?
Yeah, so I mean, really each of these sites, like this for example, right, is a place where we know that there are ecological benefits to be restored to rivers, but there's also the human benefits as well. So it really becomes individualized projects that are about benefiting both nature and people, and how we strike that balance is super nuanced depending on what community we're in, what ecosystem type we're in, but it really strengthens our ability to then move on and build the momentum elsewhere when we have these really great examples of success. I am really excited for more and more people to have hands-on experiences near rivers and to understand what the benefits are for them personally to be part of these restoration projects. So the more people we can bring down to fishways and get their hands in the water and touch fish, the more it makes our jobs easier, right? Because it's easy for people to see what incredible value these fish bring to their communities and to them as an individual.
That's awesome, and that's really the reason Mariah and I are kind of on this trip right now, is to show folks, the work that you guys are doing, but hopefully inspire folks to consider what can they do to contribute to kind of the challenges that we're facing right now. So you are literally the last stop on our journey, and you nailed it.
Oh, thank you.
Great chatting with you. It was a great day with you today. So thank you, Molly.
Thanks.
Oh, it's a good sound, isn't it, Mariah?
It is, it is.
It's the sound of going across the finish line, right?
Cheers, yes.
So we are here at Dogfish Head, Maine. We just had an amazing last day yesterday with our great friends at the Nature Conservancy, learning about the fish ladders up in Maine. So this is the culmination of our trip, Miami to Maine, right?
We did it. And we're here.
And we're still talking to each other.
We're still here together, married.
And we had to, of course, close with Lemon Quest as our pairing suggestion. This is the beverage that we partner with and refer to the partnership on package, our Lemon Quest non-alc. We're choosing it for the culmination of our trip because it's refreshing in every occasion, and something that I definitely learned as we traveled from Miami to Maine was just how refreshing it is that every time we visited Nature Conservancy co-workers and the other community stakeholders that they work with in different preserves up and down the coast, just how collaborative they are and thoughtful they are about finding, science-based solutions to addressing the dual crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss. We know it's a challenging moment, but the strength, the positivity, the pride that they had in their work was really inspiring for me. How about you, Mariah? What's your takeaway?
Yeah, I think my takeaway is that, it just really shows how, communities, companies, people, we all have to work together and we all have a role that we can play. And, there's lots to be done, lots of opportunities, and, we can get involved at all levels. So that's what I took away from it.
And how can people find out more about this awesome adventure that we got to go on with our friends at the Nature Conservancy?
Thanks for asking. You want to learn more about our adventure, visit dogfish.com and you can see all of our great videos. And if you want to learn more about TNC's good work,
and how you can get involved and engaged to help fight for a better tomorrow,
visit nature.org.
Cheers.